Hello and welcome to Season 8, Episode 8 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
We're, of course, reading Moral Politics by George Lakoff as he breaks down how liberals and conservatives use language to represent their worldviews in varying degrees of success. I don't know how well of a job he's doing. But in this chapter, he does actually go into how conservatives versus liberals categorize everything. Again, really not stating that much new information. But he does, at least in this example, bring it at least a little bit into the real world, pointing out like figures that are commonly demonized or commonly celebrated by conservatives and liberals, and how he thinks that plays into the whole strict father versus nurturant parent morality, at least a little bit.
Yeah, I'm becoming convinced that he had a page requirement for his book, and they said, yes, we will pay you X dollars if you write in enough pages.
Yes.
And because he's saying the same stuff over and over again.
Yeah, because, well, including
even
afterward.
Even within the chapter itself.
Including the afterword, it's 445 pages. But before that, it's, let's see, just before 400, about 388, if you include the epilogue. There's two afterwards, by the way, so he has plenty to say, but he doesn't really seem to be making or saying much at all.
They must have had a contract for him to write 400 pages.
Yeah.
And I don't think he did that, did he? Because there's an epilogue, so that doesn't count. So he probably still didn't hit the... Anyway, I mean, that's just the feel I get from it.
Yeah.
Is that he's very repetitive.
He does make some interesting points here, though, I think, in this chapter. I think so, at least a little bit.
All right. Well, I look forward to hearing your comments on that. So he's talking about, this is the chapter titled Moral Categories in Politics. So he does a good job in the first paragraph of each chapter just summarizing things. And so I'll just read the first sentence. A moral system defines how one views the world, how one comprehends hundreds of events, great and small, every day, which I think is a pretty good summary of how, if you have a moral outlook, that's a good summary of what that would be. But he asserts in that same paragraph that those categories allow us to classify actions instantly into those that are moral and those that are not, with little or no reflection, which I think he probably doesn't think much about morality.
Yeah,
I think he's assuming that other people think the way he does, which is just knee jerk. I have this. I don't really know why I like these things and dislike those things, and he thinks everybody is in that position. Yeah. At least that's the sense I get.
Well, he's right to a degree in that is a lot of how language works, is that categorization. I think when he talks about morality, he's wrong. I think when we group things into moral systems, there's definitely reflection going on there. But I think he is right, and I think it's an important part of what makes language so significant. Because it's not just like a collection of words and their definitions, but we're constantly putting words into categories. And that's like a sort of an established thing in linguistics. It's like every word belongs to multiple categories. We have a category, we can just instantly call to mind, things that are blue, and all of the words that we associate with the word blue, in those categories. So I think he's right there. I think that is an interesting thing to look into, how we categorize everything. But when he pulls it into morality, I don't know how strong it is.
That's the problem I have with it, is that a moral scheme is different than just like, I prefer these things. These things fit in this type of language, and if you speak to me in using these words or these categories, maybe I'll be more inclined to agree with you. Yeah. And I think that there's some usefulness in that.
Because I think there is some amount of knee-jerk reaction in listening to language. Listening to people speak. There is that instantaneous, okay, do I like what this person is saying? Do I not? But then when he tries to fit it into, well, this is how our whole moral system works, that's the problem. And I think looking at those sort of knee-jerk reactions is an interesting thing to look into, for sure.
First impressions.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's trying to say it's more than that. And he's not trying, he's saying it's more than that. But also saying, he's trying to say again, I keep saying this, trying to say too much and too little at the same time. He's trying to say that it's a moral system, but that we don't really even think about it. Yes. Well, if we don't even think about it, then it's not a moral system, is it? I mean, if you don't even consider the morality of what you're doing or what your views are, is it a moral system? Yeah. Or is it just a knee-jerk reaction, first impression, just deciding things without really thinking it through? Yeah. So anyway, he talks first about the conservative moral categories, which I think are repetitive.
There's 5 of them.
Yes. So one is promoting strict father morality in general. Okay, that's really stating the same thing. Because why is that a separate category?
Yeah.
If your category is conservative, strict father morality.
If you think that all of their morality is about this, then why is the first subsection of that morality the thing itself?
Yes. Well, promoting it,
Yes.
I guess. And then second thing, this is moral action. So this is the action of it. So promoting the strict father morality in general. Then the second subsection, promoting self-discipline, responsibility, and self-reliance, which I think is really just the first thing he's saying, because those are subparts of the first one,
yes.
aren't they? And then the third one is upholding the morality of reward and punishment, which has A, B, and C. A, preventing interference with the pursuit of self-interest by self-disciplined, self-reliant people. B, promoting punishment as a means of upholding authority. And C, ensuring punishment for lack of self-discipline, which is all subcategories of the second subcategory, because if you're promoting self-discipline, responsibility, and self-reliance, you necessarily will have 3A, B, and C.
Yes.
Because those are within and necessary components of 2. So 1 is just the general thing. 2 is the specifics. 3 is within the specifics. So it's really just he said 1. But he has 3 separate sections with 3 subparts to the third one. And the third one is protecting moral people from external evils.
Yes, that was the fourth.
Fourth one, sorry. And then the fifth one is upholding the moral order, which is just restating the first one.
Yes,
because you have the moral order of strict father morality. So if you're promoting strict father morality in general, you're of course upholding the moral order.
Yes.
So he's restating this. He's really just saying one thing, which is section 2, promoting self-discipline, responsibility, and self-reliance, isn't he?
I think so. I mean, I think in his little subcategories, he does at least differentiate a little bit when he actually talks about them a little more, and he describes them a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, but that's an explanation of number 2.
Yes.
it's within number 2.
Yes, I agree.
It's not 5 different types of categories of moral action. There's only really one category of moral action, and the rest of it is subparts of that, in my opinion. But anyway.
But he does make, I think, an interesting point in that first subsection when he talks about that a little bit, because he says, the moral system itself, of course, is right, so right that it defines what right is. And I think that is true, but not just for strict father morality, because I don't think he makes that same point for the liberal side later. Which is interesting because I think that is 100% true in any moral system. If you believe in a moral system, then it is self-evidently right to a degree, at least in your mind. You know what I mean?
I know what you're saying.
Yes.
I completely and totally 100% disagree.
You think so?
Because I think that the moral system itself is not what is right and defines what is right.
Yes.
Because your moral system is dependent upon certain core beliefs. So the system that you're applying is, as far as the conservatives are concerned, really any effective morality is you don't just say, well, this system is right, so everything in the system is right. It's like it's a more of a belief in process or procedure or definitions as opposed to reevaluating everything on a case-by-case basis based upon certain principles.
I guess I'm really extending what he's saying too far because he's really not saying that. Because, I think, everybody generally believes in certain things that are just like core virtues, that think are inherently good. Yes. That's kind of what I mean. Like if you think something is inherently good, you're going to work to ensure that everything is in line with those inherently good things.
Yes.
But he only makes that point for the conservatives here and only about strict father morality, which isn't like an inherently good, thing I think that a lot of people would think.
Right.
But I think a lot of people, I think everybody has those inherently good things that they believe. Yes. And so anything that's opposed to those things, they're just going to inherently think are wrong. Correct. And my point is, it's weird that he does not make that same point for the other side.
I agree with
because
that.
Because they absolutely have their own 100% set in stone things, but he doesn't make that point for them later. Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. But I think he's trying to say it's a knee-jerk reaction, and you believe in the system no matter what, even if it's immoral. I think that's really what he's coming down to, because the system, you believe the system is moral, so even if the system is immoral, you're going to defend it, even if it contradicts with your moral beliefs. I think that's what he's going to end up saying later, but we'll get to that. So what that was number 1, the major category. So promoting strict father morality is just saying this: you believe that the system is accurate, so you're going to defend it no matter what. And then he mentions the promoting self-discipline, responsibility, and self-reliance.
It just kind of goes back to the moral strength thing that he talked about earlier. You know,
Right.
if moral strength is very important to you, you know, you're going to promote self-discipline, responsibility, and self-reliance, which is true.
Yeah.
I think that's fair enough.
Yeah, and then but he doesn't talk really too much about that because it's effective. You know, it actually means a lot to conservatives and to liberals.
So you can't just make up things around
right.
it,
Well, you just
easily.
Kind of, oh yeah, they say this.
Yeah.
But then he talks about upholding the morality of reward and punishment, and this I thought was really weird because he says strict father morality assumes that it is human nature that people operate in terms of rewards and punishments, and I think this is where kind of he really lays out how he views morality as just a person's belief in effective government services. He confuses those two.
Yeah.
You know, like, so conservatives understand that by human nature, people as a society, not as individuals, but as a group. If you're trying to do statistics and you're trying to make a public policy that applies to 300 million people, you know that a system of rewards and punishments will have an effect on society as a whole.
Yes.
And that's different than saying it's a system of morality.
Like everyone inherently, like their
Yes.
moral system is dependent on reward and punishment.
Right.
But he thinks it is.
He
That's what
confuses
he thinks.
effectiveness with moral goodness. And I think a lot of conservative views and some liberals, but it's hard to argue about some of these things with liberals because they see it as trying as the ultimate good,
Yeah.
as opposed to what's the outcome. And that's what I think a lot of these disagreements are on public policy and government programs. There's one disagreement of whether the government should even be involved with that, which he's making that point too. But then the secondary thing is, okay, if we're going to do this, what's the most effective way to do it? If you have rewards and you have punishments, you're going to get more people to do act properly. You know, and it's kind of common sense.
It's weird because he's like almost there. Because I think it's true that a lot of conservatives have some belief in, you know, sort of original sin. You know, that human nature is inherently, you know, corrupt in a way, and if you let people, you know, have power and things like that, they're probably going to use it for evil. And on the other side, I think a lot of the liberals think human nature is inherently good, and people just sort of happen into things. But he doesn't really get there. You know, he says, you know, a lot of conservatives think, okay, human nature inherently sinful, therefore we need to have a system of rewards and punishments.
Yes.
It's not because the rewards and punishments are the moral system. It's because we have created them to be effective on top of what we understand human nature to be.
Right. But you know, as I'm getting older, I see the wisdom in that. Differentiation between liberals and conservatives, like and those two terms are pretty weighted in our current political climate, and you can see how we're going to talk about this in a little bit. How those principles have changed as it applies to public policy over time, because this is a book that is not timeless. Because he mentions current events, But yeah, I think there's like two main categories of people, and the people that think that we're born, and if we were not corrupted, we would be angels, corrupted by society or other outside influences. I was born perfect, but because of these other people, I am not perfect.
Yes.
As opposed to the people that believe, you know, I am not perfect. I'm a sinner, and I need to work on this, and I need everybody else's help to keep me in line. And I think that is really a fundamental difference in how you look at the government too.
Oh, for sure.
Anyway, so he talks about that, and he talks about that's three. So that's just 3, and then 3A was preventing interference with the pursuit of self-interest by self-disciplined, reliant people.
Which is the same thing as 2. You know, if you prioritize moral strength, of course you're going to want to prioritize, you know, self-interest, you know, prevent interference with that.
Yes.
Sure.
And so I don't know why he has that differentiated. But and then 3B, promoting punishment as a means of upholding authority. So he sees this as that, you know, that it's, you know, punishment is just a way to keep, I guess, power, and it must be upheld. Legitimate authority must be upheld at all costs, or the moral system ceases to function, which no conservative believes. Tyrants believe that. I mean, who believes that the authority has to be upheld at all costs? I don't know. I guess you see that on the left now with the January 6th prosecutions and stuff. You hear that language. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, the next one, 3C, ensuring punishment for lack of self-discipline. And so if you're not taking care of yourself and your own stuff and you're weak, then you're gonna be punished in order to get you back in the line, I guess. I don't know. I don't really see that as an overarching moral philosophy of the conservatives, but I thought it was really interesting. And then 4, he just mentions it again. Then 5, upholding the moral order. He says, since the moral order defines legitimate authority, actions upholding it are moral, and actions going against it are immoral. And so I guess, like we just talked about, I guess he has a point, but it seems so simplistic, and he just asserts this. Yeah. And
well, he can't get to the idea that conservatives have virtues. Like, I think that's really what it is. He can't comprehend that there is an underlying moral system behind everything. He thinks the moral system is the authority itself, because all of these, or a lot of them anyway, just kind of come back to upholding the status quo. Yes. That's not really what conservatives want. I think that's what tends to be the outcome. A lot of their policies is we don't want radical change, because if it works, don't try to fix it. But I mean, contrast that to what he says about liberal moral action here lower on the page. He understands that they have virtues, because the number one thing in his categories of the liberals is emphatic behavior and promoting fairness. Putting empathy. Empathetic. Yes. Sorry, not emphatic. Well, empathetic behavior and promoting fairness. So he sees those as like crucial towards liberal ideals, but he doesn't have those same virtues in the conservatives. He can't seem to comprehend that there's something behind the authority that needs to be upheld first before the authority. Yeah.
So he has. So the 5 that he has for them is empathetic behavior and promoting fairness. 2, helping those who cannot help themselves. 3, protecting those who cannot protect themselves. 4, promoting fulfillment in life. And 5, nurturing and strengthening oneself in order to do all the above.
And those are much more fundamental things than anything he described, I think, in the conservative one.
Well, they're more value based, and they're conservative values. 3 of them. Helping those who cannot help themselves. And protecting those who cannot protect themselves. What do you think the police department's for?
Yeah.
I mean, who's the law and order people saying we have to have force out there to protect people who cannot protect themselves? Is that really what liberals believe in? Maybe in some circumstances, but and then promoting fulfillment in life, that is for both. It's just they see fulfillment in different ways. Yeah. So I don't see those. I think the empathy versus rational, or I don't want to say like rational or irrational, empathy versus intellectual or logical, precise. I think that
empathy maybe versus
I'm trying not trying to use a loaded word for the intellectual rational analysis of how programs work, as opposed to how it makes people feel.
Effectiveness.
Effective.
Empathy versus
Thank
effectiveness.
you. And I think there is a difference there. I think there is a value that liberals place on this empathy and making people feel better, which is a value. I'm not trying to discount that, although I personally tend to discount that because I think that's not anybody else's responsibility. But that I understand the logic of saying, hey, we got to make people feel better. We should at least try to make people feel better. And so that empathy, I think he's right about that. But the other stuff are just more universal values. And I don't think that really accurately describes the difference in really what their moral action is really based upon, that separates them from conservatives. But
and then in his descriptions, it's kind of just repeating the name of the thing itself again, because it's like
very short.
Because it's morality. As empathy is so foundational to liberals, therefore they're going to promote empathy and things like that. Sure.
Thanks for explaining that with the same words. It's like you're defining it like, what is a woman? Well, it's a woman.
And then 2 and 3, that's just all about the nurturance. If you want to help people who can't help themselves, it's the role of the government, it's the role of, people who have, money or whatever to nurture them, to help them grow and things like that. Which I think is true enough that is the reasoning.
It's not really their values. It's not helping those that cannot help themselves. That's not the standard liberal take on that. It's helping those who want more help. It's not, if they limit their advocacy, and they used to back even before my time, so we're really talking about the 60s and 70s, they used to say, we only want to help those that can't help themselves.
Yes.
Social Security, disability benefits. These are physically disabled people. They're paralyzed. They're in a wheelchair. Back before they had the ADA and they had accommodations, they couldn't work. There wasn't a job for many people that had disabilities. But now they expanded to like mental problems and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not minimizing serious mental health issues, but we all get anxiety at work from time to time. Times that wake up on time and go to work. Anyway, so that's a whole different. I'm about to go on a rant. I just said before, but I'm going to stop myself. Yes. So then he just restates. I don't know if you have anything more to that, but I think he just restates. For the sake of comparison, let's look at both moral category systems together. We just did that. Was it 2 pages ahead of it? I mean, it was literally he's 4 pages into it, and then he restates the 5 and the 5.
Yes,
with the 3 subparts, the 3 on the first 5.
But then he provides the example of college loans, and that's what he does. And sure. And
he says that conservatives are against it for whatever reason. I really don't remember conservatives being against, as a matter of principle, emphatically against subsidized student loans. But maybe in the 90s they were against it. But doesn't really. I don't recall a huge fight over that.
I think conservatives think they should be limited, much more limited than they are. I know that's a common argument now, but it's not on principle. They are inherently an evil thing that we cannot let our society have. And that's the way he's framing it, because he says liberal rationale is college is expensive, and a great many poor to middle class students cannot afford it. This loan program allows a great many students to go to college who otherwise wouldn't.
Yes.
Sure. I mean, that's just kind of true. But that's true for both sides. Like, that's just a statement of facts. That's not their rationale for it. It's just saying there's a lot of people who can't afford college. College loans help them afford it.
Right.
Sure. And then he says, through conservative spectacles, this is an immoral program. Since students depend on the loans, the program supports dependence on the government rather than self-reliance.
Yeah, because the conservatives aren't against the borrowing of money, because the idea of and that's why it got passed, is because it was a loan, not a grant.
Yeah.
But he asserts to a liberal, it is obviously the right thing to do, and to a conservative, it is obviously the wrong thing to do. In the argument in conservative circles for many years, as long as I can recall, has always been that there's a perverse incentive to increase the tuition because the subsidized financing of it and the deferred payments until after graduation, so people aren't really feeling the bite of the loan until after you've already accumulated all the debt. And once the student loan program got authorized, you saw skyrocketing rates of tuition. Yeah. And it has to be a cause and effect on that. But that's a practical argument about the effectiveness of the program, not the morality of the program.
Well, I think now also you do have a little bit. I guess it's still effectiveness. It's not really a moral thing, but I think you are starting to see among conservatives an idea that we're just promoting college too much.
Well, that's true.
Like we're just telling every student that they need to go to college, and then people go into college, they don't really have any idea what they study, and they get a useless degree, and then they have all this debt because they've taken on so many loans. And so that's an aspect of it where we're just promoting it too much, but it's not like the loans themselves are the evil part of it.
Well, correct. And I'm not going to go on a rant, but I will say this. College university system as it was set up was not for the average person. Okay. And so, and you're not supposed to say those things now, but universities and colleges, higher education should be for the people that are intellectually at the top of the heap, meaning the top half. Yeah. So like the bottom half of high school classes in an average class, probably shouldn't be going to college. I mean, what are they studying, and what's the purpose of that? I mean, shouldn't trade schools be more appropriate for that? And having said that, I couldn't do a lot of these trades. I still can't figure out a 3-switch electrical outlet. I don't know what it is about it. The variables involved, and I always get it wrong. Yes. I mean, eventually I get it right, but it takes me a while to figure out a 3-switch outlet or light switch. So I'm not saying that trade schools are for dummies, but really, why would you have maybe top half is maybe limiting too much, but it's like we say everybody has to go to college, and there are people in college that should not, especially if you're in debt. You have no business being there. I mean, you're just wasting your own time. Yeah. You're wasting the professor's time. But that's, again, you're right. It's a separate issue than the student loan program, which it was I never remember any conservative saying it's an immoral program. The grants based upon race or gender, I've heard moral arguments about that it's immoral to favor people and give them money and benefits based upon the color of their skin or whether they're born a male or female. I've heard those, but I've never heard moral arguments against a student loan program because you're borrowing the money. I mean, the only government intervention it is subsidizing and guaranteeing the loan, of course. But you can't even discharge it out of bankruptcy. Yeah. So it's a weird thing for him to put up. Yes. But whatever. I mean, but he does mention this at the end of this section here. He talks about it. Well, the point of the example is that these are not matters of rational discussion on the basis of literal and objective categories. He says the debate is not a matter of objective means end rationality or cost benefit analysis or effective public policy. The debate is about the right form of morality. As opposed, when he's talking about college loans, is he insane? Yeah. I mean, the vast majority of the discussions are about what's the most effective way to make college the most affordable for the most people on both sides.
Yeah, well, he even says, like before that, he says, I started with college loans because it's not as heated an issue as abortion or welfare, the death penalty, or gun control. Yes. It's like if you want to be talking about moral categories, I would say all of those are better options to be talking about morality on rather than just student loans. I would love to see him, well, I'm sure he will at some point, talk about abortion. And I'm sure it'll be terrible explanation of everything.
He's got a whole chapter titled Abortion.
Oh, good.
It's good.
Yes,
really
that's going to be a fun one.
That's going to be a rant-worthy one.
Yes.
All right, so then are we ready to move on to the demons? Which actually I thought he had a pretty decent explanation.
Model citizens and demons here.
Model citizens. So first he talks about the conservative model citizens are, number one, have conservative values and act to support them. Okay, that's just a restatement. 2, who are self-disciplined and self-reliant. Okay, that's really the one thing that he says about them. And 3, who uphold the morality of reward and punishment. Okay, that's the means to the whatever.
2, yeah.
4, who work to protect the moral citizens. All right, well, people who work against it. 5, who act in support of the moral order. Oh, it's the same thing as 4. And of course, anyway.
Well, I find it's
1
crazy.
and 5 are exactly the same again.
Well, he says here, what he says is the perfect person. I don't know how he came to these conclusions, because he says those who best fit all these categories are successful, wealthy, law-abiding, conservative businessmen who support a strong military and a strict criminal justice system, who are against government regulation, and who are against affirmative action. They are the model citizens. Yeah. Some of those, law-abiding, conservative people, sure. Where do you get businessmen from those 5 things?
Wealthy.
Yeah, wealthy. Where does that come from?
It's a stereotype of Republicans from the 1990s.
Yeah, exactly.
He's just trying to throw it in there because, a conservative can be an auto mechanic. Yeah. Who believes that strict father morality system, that I'm work my own way through here. You don't have to be wealthy to have the values that he talks about in this thing, and not a businessman either. I mean, there's overlap, but he wants to demonize.
Yes, because I could see successful. Sure, success comes from self-discipline and self-reliance, but then to go from success equals wealthy equals businessman, that's not how people think. Yes. I don't know.
So he talks about these model citizens fit an elaborate mythology. They have succeeded through hard work, have earned whatever they have through their own self-discipline, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a mythology that people actually work their way up. And the American dream is that any honest, self-disciplined, hardworking person can do the same. And that is true. That is the American dream.
Yes.
And he clearly doesn't believe in the American dream.
Of course.
So let's move on to the conservative demons.
He comes to the right conclusion here. This is funny. This is pretty good.
Right.
This is pretty good. I'll give him credit.
So conservatives have a demonology. Conservative moral categories produces a categorization of citizens from hell. Anti-ideal prototypes. These nightmare citizens are those who, by their very nature, violate one or more of the conservative moral categories. So what's category one demons? Well, deviants, feminists, gays, and other deviants at the top of the list because they don't believe in the strict father theory. Postmodern humanists who deny the existence of any absolute values. Egalitarians, thank you. The people that,
against moral authority.
Against the moral order. That's a pretty good list, I think.
Yeah. But I think it's again, he's coming at it from the wrong place. He says it's because they're opposed to the morality. No, I'm not opposed to postmodern humanists who deny the existence of any absolute values because they're against strict father morality. I'm against them because they deny the truth of absolute values in anything.
Correct.
He's just skipping a step.
Yes,
as he always is.
Yes. Category 2 demons, those who lack self-discipline, including unemployed drug users. I like how he says unemployed drug users. I think that's true. Yeah. Because if you're a drug user and you're able to function, I don't think the conservatives think you're a demon. I think you're stupid. And then who else? Oh, he always has to say unwed mothers.
Yes.
That's the saint. That's the St. George Floyd of the 1990s. So they always have their thing that they hold up as the moral good, and now it's St. George Floyd. And then it was unwed mothers, single mothers. Oh, they're so oppressed. And then able-bodied people on welfare. I agree with that.
I think you've gone on that rant about 5 times. Yes. I think actually on this podcast.
Category 3 demons, protectors of the public good, and these are the demons. I don't know where he gets this stuff from. That the people who are the protectors of the public good, quote public good, are demons to conservatives. But like consumer advocates, environmentalists, advocates of affirmative action. Well, I agree with that, but that's not public good. Yeah. But he calls it public good, and people advocates for government-supported universal health care. But again, these are practical objections to these. Like the universal health care. Of course, there's also an argument about whether in a constitutional republic we should have government mandated health care. Yeah.
Well, I think you're also seeing on the right sort of a rise in an idea of like the common good morality, as in like the purpose of the government. I think you're seeing that more and more among conservatives with like the point of our government structures is to promote the common good of all people, and then getting into how that's defined and things like that. But I think that's not a demonized thing by conservatives, at least at this point.
Well, I think the next one has really changed a lot. It really has changed, which is category 4 demons. Those are those who oppose the ways that the military and criminal justice system have operated. Man, that's not anymore. I mean, the conservatives are the more critical of the military interventions and law enforcement. It used to be right about this in the sense that it was back the blue 100%. But now with liberal control of a lot of law enforcement, it's a real eye opener.
I mean, I think you still see a lot of back the blue and referring to local police departments, but that by no means extends to federal agencies at this point. Like, I think that's the big divide a lot of the time with conservatives.
Some of the divide, but I got to tell you, in Republican circles, it's mixed. Yeah, it depends. It depends on the circumstances, and there are some very conservative people that are like municipal court reform, so-called reform, which is a big thing after the Michael Brown attempted murder of Darren Wilson, who was exonerated. That was led by the Republican legislature because they really hated the police actions from these local governments because they thought they were heavy-handed.
Interesting.
And so And they were right. I think their prescriptions were wrong. They could have at least just enforced the laws that are on the books against those primarily African-American cities in St. Louis County who were just abusing their own people terribly without due process and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so I think this has changed since he wrote the book initially. That we don't consider people who are critical of the law enforcement or the military interventions as demons to conservatives. It depends, though. Like Cori Bush, I mean, I don't know what you call her a demon, but
pretty crazy.
Conservatives would. But the painting with the broad brush, criticizing all law enforcement, defund the police. Okay.
Well, I also think it's interesting in this category. He lumps, he has a true statement, but I don't know why it's in this category. The category of those who oppose the military and criminal justice systems. Abortion doctors, he lists under here. He says abortion doctors may be the worst since they directly kill the most innocent people of all, the unborn.
True.
That's true, but I don't know what they have to do with the military and criminal justice systems. But sure.
But he's right that they are demonic.
That is true.
Category 5, demons, according to him, for conservatives, is advocates of equal rights for women, gays, non-whites, and ethnic Americans. They work to upset the moral order because I don't know where he gets the non-white thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
The gays, you can make an argument, that advocates for equal rights for gays, because it's a category of behavior. I could see that argument being made, but I don't know where he's saying that. He just inserts the racial thing up there. There's no racial component to the previous categories.
Just like how he inserted like the money component to the ideal person. It's like, well, that doesn't really base it off of your ideas here. But he does come to the right conclusion. With the demon of all demons for conservatives is, not surprisingly, Hillary Clinton. And I think that is probably the most accurate thing that he has said in this entire book.
Well, she's an uppity woman, and that's why...
of course.
That's a quote from the book.
That's why
people don't like her. It has nothing to do with the fact that she's corrupt, a warmonger, and an inveterate liar.
Oh, well, she's a warmonger. He says she's an anti-war activist. That's an interesting way to put that.
It's funny that's how she would be described in the 1990s.
Yeah.
And she, in her core, is absolutely the opposite. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
When she was, this is well before she was Secretary of State under Obama, when they're droning American citizens with no due process. When they're going into Libya without any sort of authorization and bombing people, and then her joke, paraphrasing, was it? I came, I saw, I conquered. I don't know if you saw her quote. Oh, you don't remember that quote?
I've seen this. Yeah.
Muammar Gaddafi was the dictator of Libya.
Yeah. And
he volunteered, after Saddam Hussein was pulled out of the spider hole in Baghdad, after we invaded Iraq, after he was executed, Gaddafi voluntarily gave up his weapons program with kind of the general idea that he would not be pulled out of a hole and executed by American military.
Yeah.
And then anyway, so there's like a civil war, and we got involved in it. And the whole thing went down there, and we're bombing his supporters. He gets apprehended, and it's on video, where they kill him. Basically, they stab him. There's a guy shoving a long bladed instrument right up his hindquarters on camera.
Wow.
And so he's killed, executed. Really brutal. Terrible. I mean, he was a bad guy, but even I was like, man, that's not right.
Yeah.
Her quote was, we came, we saw, he died. Ha 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 ha. She laughed.
Yeah.
She laughed about the United States military indirectly being, not direct. It wasn't our people on the ground that killed him, but it was because of our military intervention that he was murdered.
Yeah.
And I just thought, man, that's heavy stuff. It's really wild to be that people would call her that then, because once she got power, she just wanted the power and she wanted to kill people. But anyway, so he does talk about Secretary of Labor Robert Reich, who's a little evil midget. and he's like a commie. But but it's really funny how he describes how Robert Reich, and he did this. Robert Reich did criticize corporate welfare, and he did it pretty effectively. But it didn't really. And he says it failed because he went too far. Because he criticized all corporations. And it's like you didn't build that type stuff that Obama would say later. Well, you needed public roads and all this, that to have your business function. But he had a good point about corporate welfare, which are these subsidies and these tax breaks for certain industries or certain corporations. But all of that now, and conservatives, there's always been, I'd say a majority of conservatives that were against corporate welfare. Not a majority of Republicans. Yeah. All right. So but there's the uniparty there now. They love the corporations, and they would choose them over us any day of the week. Yeah. But it was never an idealistic calculation. It was big business donated to Republicans much more back then. Now they're all for the Democrats. But back then, the big donors, corporate interests were donating to the Republicans, and so. They never got their reforms that Robert Reich was talking about, the corporate welfare, but it's really interesting to read this now, so many years later, and now the left wing is so much corporate welfare in favor of that, and the right wing is like, no, cut them out, So it's pretty wild. Yeah.
But then he goes on to the liberal model citizens.
Yes.
Similarly, 5 groups here. The model liberal citizen is 1, empathetic, 2, helps the disadvantaged, 3, protects those who needs protection, 4, promotes and exemplifies fulfillment in life, and 5, takes care of himself so he can do all this. Again, sort of just restating the 5 categories he had earlier.
And then he gives examples. Yes. Where he talks about advocates, basically. Environmental, consumer, and minority rights advocates, union organizers, doctors and social workers, peace advocates, educators, healing professionals, and artists. They're all like service providers. They don't actually do anything except for the artists. The artists create stuff, but it's not necessarily practical stuff. But there's no actual workers in those groups that he holds up as the a liberal model citizens. I mean, it's not the union workers. Yeah. It's the union organizers of the workers, which, okay, that's valuable. But he's right about this. He's 100% right that these are the model citizens for a liberal, politically minded person, as opposed to the people that are out there paving our streets and doing the work. Their model citizens are the union organizers for these workers, as opposed to the workers themselves.
Well, because it goes back to that mentality of like, somebody has to stand up for these poor, helpless, small people. They're never going to hold those, poor, helpless, small people up to any sort of like, light as they claim to.
Right.
It's always the people who are leading, these poor, helpless, small people. I think that's where you get a lot of the praise of the communists, is because, they were helping out the small person. Right. They were the one on top just to help everybody else. And it's like, well, that's not really how it went.
Yes. So who are the demons? Those are the model, liberal models. The demons are mean-spirited, selfish people. We don't like them. Number 2, anybody who would ignore, harm, or exploit the disadvantaged. So if you just ignore the disadvantaged, and I think this is an accurate description of the demons. The first one was wealthy companies and businesses who care only about profit. That's not their job, but I think that's true. It's a good description of what liberals think are demons. And they think people that would ignore the disadvantaged are demons. And then the third one was people who actively hurt people or the environment. They include violent criminals. I don't know that that's true anymore.
St. George Floyd? I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe, out of control police officers, polluters, those who make unsafe products. I think that's a description of who they think are demons liberals do. And then number 4, those who are against public support of education, art, and scholarship. I think that's an accurate description. If you say, I want to cut the National Endowment for the Humanities, you're evil. Yes. That's a response. It's not, hey, can we find funding elsewhere? It's no, you are evil if you say that. So that's the accurate description, I think. And those who are against expansion of healthcare for the general public, I think that is also accurate. Yes. So they think that's demonic. He doesn't say. It's weird to me, though. He doesn't say that's. He doesn't even imply or suggest that people might think that's wrong to think of people who are against government healthcare as demonic, as people. You know, you would think that there would be some words of caution there, but there's not.
I don't know.
But anyway. And then he says the person who epitomizes this, Newt Gingrich, which is just a weird thing. But it was in the middle of these fights between Bill Clinton and the Republican legislature at the time. And that's the last time we had a balanced budget. Is when Bill Clinton triangulated to get reelected. Yeah. And compromised and had welfare reform and cut the budget and we had a balanced budget. It was a long time.
Have you seen? This isn't really related. Have you seen Chris Farley's impersonation of Newt Gingrich?
Yes, he
went into the it wasn't the House floor, but I think it was some sort of press room or something with like all of the members of the House of Representatives. It's very funny.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah. But he doesn't explain why Newt Gingrich is the demon, as he did for Hillary Clinton. Do you know?
Well, it's self-evident. He's a demon. I mean, it's in the name, of course.
Yeah. So, what else is the next thing is?
I mean, he doesn't have too much else to say throughout the rest of the chapter.
Really, he doesn't.
But he says, there's only a couple pages left here.
Yes.
But he does say, we need to figure out the logic behind the categories of policies, which I think he's been saying we need to do this for about 9 chapters now.
Yeah, he had to fit another 100 pages in before he got to it. And he keeps promising to explain why people who are in favor of gun control are in favor of progressive taxation, gay rights, multiculturalism, and abortion. I'm interested to see how he's going to square that circle.
Yeah. I think he's, of course, still being very unfair to the conservatives, but I do think this book is useful so far. And we're going into a new part here. We're moving on to part 4, the hard issues. So the next few chapters are going to be specific issues, and so hopefully we'll get actually to the meat of things here. But I do think this book is still useful for looking at how a genuine conservative-hating liberal actually views conservatives.
Yes.
A little out of date by now, and things have changed a little bit. But just even in his descriptions, how he can't seem to wrap his mind around things. It's interesting to really see what he thinks of these things.
Yeah, I mean, like the some of the timeliness stuff I'm just mentioning as an aside, just because you didn't live through it like I did, but the same attitude applies. They just changed the terms. Yeah. He wouldn't have Newt Gingrich in a newer version of the book. He'd have
be
Donald
Trump. Yeah, of course.
Even though Donald Trump is not really a conservative thinker, if that makes any sense. But
he's certainly not building up a conservative moral system.
Moral system at all. But I did like at the very end of this chapter, he mentions that people deviate from these categories. You might be conservative in some things than others. He says, I believe that the readers are not. Those readers are not prototypical, and he's describing central prototypes, and some people fall into one of the others. And I just viewed that as he's saying I'm going to give you a model, but he's not going to give you a model because there's so many exceptions, and I just felt like he's saying these are like Obi-Wan Kenobi, these are not the droids you're looking for. These are not the models you're looking for. If you find yourself disagreeing with me miscategorizing you, well, you're the exception because everybody else that's reading this, he mentions other readers. Yes. General readers are going to agree with what I'm saying.
Yes. Well, I'm just describing my least favorite conservative ever, my own twisted view of him, and that is the prototypical one, and all of you are like that horrible, evil person.
Yeah, he shouldn't have made this a morality thing. He should have made it a kind of a more of a language,
and I was expecting it to be
that heavy weighted language.
Well, considering he is a linguist and is pretty important in the field of sociolinguistics and stuff like that, I was expecting a lot more language in here, and so far we have not really gotten any. Really He's had a few examples here and there with people tend to use these words without really any data on that. Just saying, generally, conservatives like the word, tough love.
Yes.
Okay, sure. Okay. But I hope. I keep saying this. I think at the end of every episode, I think he's going to finally, get to it. But I don't know.
It never happened.
Yeah. Well. Oh well.
Because he's trying to defame his enemies.
Yes.
And he's trying to convince his supporters how to talk to the left wing people or the empathetic people. Don't go down the path of reason and common sense and that type. Well, I'm obviously overstating it, but he's trying to explain how you can communicate with the middle group who aren't really partisan one way or the other. Mm-hmm. You got to use these terms to talk about empathy and try to reestablish a moral or virtues based accounting for their priorities.
Yes.
Because they were getting crushed in those arguments. I mean, that's how Clinton got reelected. He's just capitulated on those issues, those morality issues about welfare and all that kind of stuff.
True.
Yeah.
Right. Well, do you have any other final thoughts for this episode?
I guess not, because it sounds like you want to wind up.
Well, we've been talking for almost an hour.
Really?
Yeah, it's been 50 minutes.
Time flies.
The time flies when you're talking about some book that's...
I can go on some more rants if you want.
I thought you started this saying you wanted this to be short and you weren't going to go on any rants. So.
I didn't go on any rants, did I?
You didn't.
Well,
a couple here. Well, it's unavoidable.
Historical
yes.
discussion.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been Season 8, Episode 8 of Unlimited Opinions. I've been Adam Bishop.
Still Mark Bishop.
Watch out for Newt Gingrich. She'll be under your bed tonight. The bogeyman.
He'd be under. Well, back then he was under his mistress's bed. I think his wife was dying of cancer.
Oh, that's pretty awful.
Because they impeached Clinton for the Monica Lewinsky affair, so that the guy that the Penthouse publisher put a reward out for any Republican that voted for the impeachment for any information leading to documentation that they had an affair. And the people in Washington were scared poopless.
I bet.
Because they're all fooling around.
Oh, yeah. Well, all politicians.